Thank you, Maria. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin, let me introduce myself briefly. So, my name's Eva. Before I came to Iceland in 2012, I used to work at the Warsaw University at the Faculty of Biology. And after a period of being a full-time mother, I went back to the science 2 years ago. And since then, I work in the Icelandic Institute of Natural History as aerobiologist. So today I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about pollen in Iceland. I hope to show you how fantastic, how interesting, how important they are. So let's start with my main questions. Is Iceland really a paradise for people with pollen allergy? For me, Iceland can be a bit like a paradise, but I don't have any allergy. So what about if you have? My talk today is divided into five parts. In the first part, I like to talk about pollen and pollen allergy. Then, in the second part, I will focus on pollen monitoring. Then I will describe pollen season in Iceland. Next, I will look at the link between climate change and the pollen season. And finally, I will go to talk about the pollen forecasting. So let me start with some general information about the pollen. Pollen was described for the first time in the book of Anatomy of Plants by British doctor and botanist Nehemiah Grew in 17th century. Pollen is tiny grains playing an essential role in the process of fertilization in plants. It is usually transported from plant to plant by wind or insect, but sometimes even by water or big animals like birds. So maybe important thing is that pollen can be allergic and cause symptoms of seasonal allergic rhinitis. Pollen has very interesting morphology, and its grain can differ considerably regarding the size, color, shape, and pattern. So pollen grain can look like a beautiful works of art that you can frame and hang on your wall. Let's take a look at these photographs to give you an example of how charming pollen is. So for example, this one. This. Oh, coconut. And the birch. So aren't they really amazing? Aren't they beautiful? And by reproducing pollen forms, Joe Goldsworthy attempted to illustrate a botanical world present everywhere, yet invisible to the naked eye. So you can buy a sculpture of the pollen and put it into your own garden. For sure, pollen can be both beautiful and useful in different fields of science. Here, you can see some of the main examples of pollen application of pollen analysis. Here, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the pollen has been widely used as a dietary supplement since the times of Hippocrates. it contains high amount of vitamins, special vitamins A or B, and a range of secondary plant metabolites that have been proved to be beneficial to human health. For example, polyphenols. And pollen analysis also is used by government agencies, museums, oil companies, archaeologists and paleobiologists, and finally, also during some religious rituals. So what studying pollen gives scientists, in another word, is the means that to do what the poet William Blake once imagined. To see a world in a grain of the sun and a heaven in the white flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and the eternity in an hour. And add to that the ability to solve the occasionally murder, and then pollen science begins to sound like a kind of career a kid could grow up dreaming about. Let's turn to the next issue, pollen allergy. So seasonal allergic rhinitis is the type of allergy that affects the greatest number of people, from 10 to 40%. And this number increases each year. The first description of the symptoms can be found in the 10th century medical treaty by a Persian scholar, Rhazes. And this book is one of the most famous medical books from the Middle Ages. But it was Charles Blackley who showed for the first time that it is pollen that causes the symptoms of allergic rhinitis. However, the person who transformed the world's understanding of allergies was Dr. William Frankland. And one of his achievements was the popularization of the pollen count as a piece of weather-related information. By the way, he survived as a child Spanish flu pandemic, but died of COVID in June this year. So what is pollen allergy, also known as high fever or pollinosis? What experts usually call seasonal allergic rhinitis is in fact hypersensitivity to airborne pollen such as trees, grasses, and weeds. When pollen comes into contact with human cells, it stimulates the production and release of chemicals, for example, histidine, causing inflammation-like symptoms. And the spectrum of these symptoms can be wide and includes nasal, eye, and bronchial symptoms, and all combination of these. Pollen allergy is usually diagnosed by two types of tests, skin or blood tests. The problem of high fever is essentially severe in Australia and North America, where it affects between 30 and 40% of population. Whereas, for example, in Northern and Eastern Europe, pollinosis sufferers is just above 10% of populations. And this leads me to my next point, which is pollen monitoring. So pollen monitoring is carried out to obtain information about qualitative and quantitative characteristic of pollen present in the air. In other words, pollen monitoring attempts to answer three basic questions: when, what kind, and how much pollen is out of there. As I said in the beginning, pollen monitoring was initiated by Dr. Blackley in 19th century. Then, in the 1943, first pollen counts started to be recorded. And then, in 1954, the most popular pollen monitoring stations called first Hearst pollen trap has been introduced. These pollen traps are usually installed on roottops. Pollen grains attached to a sticky surface, and then microscopic preparations are made and pollen is counted manually. And results of such analysis are expressed as a number of pollen grains in a cubic meter of air per day. Today, there are almost 900 pollen monitoring stations worldwide, and most of them are in Europe. Hearst pollen, Hearst method, Hearst pollen trap is still the most popular one. And I'd like to illustrate this point by showing you the map, so you can see the Europe and how much it is. So blue dots are Hearst pollen traps. Oranges represent another manual instruments, while the red dots represent automatic pollen stations. Here is the list of the top 6 countries carrying out pollen monitoring. Number 1, Japan, then Italy, US, France, Spain, and Germany. Japan is the pioneer in automatic pollen monitoring. And this was possible, first of all, due to the fact that the number of different pollen types in Japan is low, just as here in Iceland. Prices for such instruments differ considerably and span from several thousand to over 100,000 euro. Currently, this type of technologies seem to be the most suitable for the taxon level classification of pollen, based on image recognition, laser fluorescence, and airflow cytometry. Here is an example of such automatic pollen station produced by Swiss company, Blair, and this rapid E+ can be applied for real-time recognition of pollen, but also spores, bacterials, and even viruses. The detection range of such instrument is between 0.3 to 100 micrometers. And the system is based on fluorescence measurements. As well, a special artificial intelligence-based algorithm carried out the process of pollen identification with a great accuracy, providing information on pollen in the real time. And this solution can spare thousands of working hours that are used to count pollen manually. Now I would like to say a few words about the pollen monitoring in Iceland. So pollen monitoring in Iceland started in 1988 in Reykjavik, and a decade later in Akureyri. And this monitoring produced a very nice data series of pollen counts that we can be really proud of. So This is amazing. So now we come to the next point, which is pollen season in Iceland. And there are three things to consider here. First, I would like focus on the characteristic of pollen season for major allergenic plants. Then I will tell you something more on the variability of pollen season in Iceland. And finally, I will try to answer the question, what is the length of the pollen season? But in the beginning, it should be emphasized that Iceland, it is a unique place. To see why Iceland is very different from other countries in continental Europe, let us to see it in comparison with Poland. So we have around 400 species in Icelandic flora, whereas in Poland there is Polish flora contains over 3,000 plant species. Out of this number, we have only several allergic species, allergic plants in Iceland, whereas in Poland there is around 10 times more. And when we look at the length of the pollen season, again we can see that Icelandic pollen season is significantly shorter. Let us take a look at several pictures illustrating these differences. That's what you can see during the peak of pine pollen season in Poland. And pollen is literally everywhere. Okay, so during this 30 years of pollen monitoring in Iceland, we identified a total of 62 pollen types. All of this data was analyzed to see similarities and differences between them. The plot clearly shows that only 2 pollen types, birch and grasses type, have any significance when it comes to triggering allergic reactions. On these graphs, we can see the seasonal pollen index, which is the sum of daily pollen concentrations over the whole season. And again, only 2 pollen types differ significantly from the rest. And again, this is a birch and grasses. Birch is the main pollen allergens present during the spring. And since birch trees are wind pollinated, their pollen is easily transported and can reach a very high concentration in the air. Grass pollen, on the other hand, is the main summer allergen, and it's known to cause a variety of different allergy symptoms. Icelandic pollen season is characterized by a high variation in start day and ending day, and a total length of the pollen season. The number of days when pollen concentration in the air is high enough to cause allergic symptoms can differ significantly from year to year. Days with the pollen concentration high enough to cause first symptoms are around 10 for birch and 30 for grasses. Whereas days with high concentrations causing severe symptoms are usually less than 10, so just a few days for birch and few days for grasses. But as you can see, the variations between years can be really huge. In Europe, a high level of synchronization in pollen concentration can be recorded cross distance exceeding 1,000 kilometers. In Iceland, the situation is very different, and the high concentration recorded in Reykjavik does not necessarily mean that in Akureyri the situation is similar. It can be, but it's not always like that. Let's take a look at the graphs showing general trends in pollen concentration. A clear, significant increase and statistically significant increase trend has been recorded for birch in both Reykjavik and Akureyri. It is well known from Europe that birch undergoes a 2 or 3 year cycle, which result in regular rise and falls in birch pollen concentration over the time. Another peculiar thing about Iceland is that this cycle pattern is not observed here. For grasses, the situation looks a bit different. Only in Akureyri, a clear increasing trend has been recorded. Now I'd like to recap the main points. First, the diversity of airborne pollen in Iceland is low when compared with the other countries. Second, the most important pollen allergens in Iceland are birch and grasses. Then, birch pollen season in Iceland are characterized by late onset, longer duration, and low seasonal pollen index and the peak values compared with continental Europe. Grass pollen season in Iceland are characterized by late onset, shorter duration, and seasonal pollen index and peak values comparable with those recorded in continental Europe. We recorded no synchronization in the intensity of pollen production between our two monitoring sites in Iceland. Our data do not confirm the existence of clear and repeatable cycle of high and low pollen production in birch. And the last one, statistically significant increase trend in seasonal pollen index values were recorded in Reykjavik for birch and in Akureyri for birch and grasses. So that's all I'd like to say about the pollen season. And now I like to move on to the next part, dealing shortly with the effects of climate change. There are many papers describing the link between pollen season and the climate change. And I like to present the results from one of the recent papers. So in the 12 cities across the northern hemisphere, a significant increase in pollen concentrations has been recorded. In detail, it looks like this. So seasonal cumulative pollen is increasing sharply both in Reykjavik and Krakow, and please note that this pace of this changes. So this per year. The pollen season tends to start earlier as a result of a climate change. So overall, the long-term data indicate significant increase in both pollen loads and the pollen season duration over the time. Now let's look at how situation in Iceland may look like in the in not so distant future. So this is a pine pollen haze over the Czech Republic 2 years ago. Yellow haze caused by pollen. Pictures was taken in US last year. And a picture of cedar pollen in Texas from this spring. So now we came to the last point of my presentation, which is pollen forecasting. So a pollen forecast is a prediction of what the pollen levels will be in the future, like weather forecast, and could be of great importance for allergy sufferers. But I would like to concentrate on this topic a bit more during my next lecture in April, so you are welcome. So at the end, let me go back to my main my first question. Is Iceland really a paradise for people with pollen allergy? The answer is yes, at least at the moment, because climate change will surely have a great impact on pollen situation in Iceland. So this is all, ladies and gentlemen, what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And still, I haven't seen any questions coming to our chat, but maybe we can give another minute or some short time for people if there is someone interested in asking the question. Oh yes, thank you. Now we have a question from Christian, who is asking, what is the link between global warming and pollen production?
So the link is quite. There's like a lot of points who show this link. First of all, if there's a global warming, the spring starts earlier. So the production of pollen starts earlier, and everything is longer and more intensive. If the plants have better conditions, like it's warmer, it could be really huge amount of the pollen. I don't know if that's clear. It does answer to this question. And also, yeah, and we can also look at if there is a warmer, that it will be more plant species. So the range of pollen type will be also more rich. So that will be also affect the people with high fever as well, because we will have more types. I think, yeah, this is the shortest answer to this question.
Okay, then we have a comment from Randweg. Thank you for your talk. I have lived in Iceland and Australia, and I can confirm that Australia is much worse pollen-wise than Iceland. Mm-hmm. I do suffer a lot, and for most of the year in Iceland. And then Sigurdur is asking about imported plants to Iceland, if that might result in allergy.
So in the future, yes. So now we have grasses, different kind of grasses, and the birch, and what can we expect in the near future. So it can be a lot of pine pollen grains in the air, as well rumex or urtica, and maybe such kind interesting and very dangerous pollen grains like ambrosia pollen, for example. We can notice each year some pollen from ambrosia. So I think I hope this explain a bit.
Yes, these are the all questions that we received. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for your lecture. And see you after Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you Eva Maria, and thank you also Pavel. Ég þakka ykkur hlustendur kærlega fyrir að vera með okkur á netinu.